How is it going, everyone? It's Calum here. And this Movie Monday, we're going to be talking about Death on the Nile. This movie came out in 2022 after being delayed multiple times because of the pandemic, and it has quite the cast, I will say. It has Gal Gadot in it, Letitia Wright, Russell Brand, just to name a few names. And it also has one person who I don't really want to talk about, but I'll mention him later on because he's actually the worst actor in the entire movie. I'm not just saying that because I'm biased towards him, and we'll talk about that here in a few. But the movie Death on the Nile. This is a movie I've been wanting to see for a while. I always thought it was a cool premise. I love Egypt. I love, the setting of Egypt. I love the theme. I think it's a cool location. And I thought that this was going to be a really interesting and fun movie. And one half of it is. The first half is not very good. The second half is really good. So you have your good and your bad. The first half is just super slow to start off. There's so much build up between basically all these characters and all the drama and everything. And a big problem with the first half is that there's all this drama between these characters, and these characters don't feel like they have very good chemistry. They're not written well enough to have chemistry with each other. Individually, I think the characters are okay, but once they start communicating with other characters, it's like it all goes south. That's kind of unfortunate. The whole premise of the movie is basically a millionaire gets killed on a boat that's on the Nile, and now they're all stuck on the boat trying to figure out who the killer is, and that's the whole premise of the movie. And it takes an hour for the murder to actually happen, so you're going to be waiting a while to see what happens. And then the second hour, after the murder actually happens and takes place, that's when stuff starts to get a little bit interesting, at least. And you have the main character, Perroy, who's played by, I hope I pronounce this right, Kenneth Branagh. You have him playing Perroy, and he does a fantastic job of playing this detective. He's a World War I veteran in the movie. They do, at the very beginning of the movie, they show him in World War I and kind of how good of, just a detective he is, and just how good he is at just thinking things through and strategizing. And they do a good job with his character and his background and everything. And his also love interests, which is kind of important for this movie because there's a big, kind of like one of the messages of this movie is just like people will do a lot for love. They'll do a lot of crazy things for love. And you kind of see him with his wife at the beginning of the movie, and there's a whole backstory there. And they do, like I said, they do a good job with his backstory. I really enjoyed his. The other characters don't get quite as fleshed out as well, but no wonder. This is a huge cast, I will say. The actual movie itself looks fantastic. The actual setting, the themes, the filmography, all that stuff looks fantastic. I have nothing against that. It looks good. There's a couple shots that looked a little bit too fakey, but for the most part, it looked pretty darn good. I talked about the actors and actresses who are in this earlier. I do enjoy all of their performances, even though the actual characters don't feel like they have a whole lot of chemistry. The actors, I feel like, did the best they could with what they were given. Gal Gadot does a fantastic job. Letitia Wright does a fantastic job. Russell Brand does a fantastic job. The only person who doesn't do a great job is Armie Hammer, who's in this movie. His acting is atrocious in this movie. And again, I'm not just saying that because of his controversies that he's had in the past. I'm saying that because he actually is just terrible in this movie. So he really does just kind of bring this movie down whenever he shows up in it because his acting is just very, very bland, and it feels like he didn't put in 100% effort into his role. But the movie overall goes about the way you would expect it to go. The people who you think are the killers end up being the killers. The villains, they're exactly who you think they would be. They really played it safe with the story. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but, I would have rather them do something crazy, do something I didn't expect. I expected the killers to be who they were from the very beginning, because they set it up very clearly who the killers are, but they want you to have suspicion on other people, but it's just like, well, you made it too obvious from the get-go. To me, they basically spoiled the killers right at the beginning of the movie, and that was unfortunate, because it really did just make it feel like, well, I already know who this is, so all the suspense is kind of gone. It's kind of lost on me. So that was unfortunate. But still, I don't think that this is a bad movie. I just think it's a flawed movie. It looks great. The actors did the best they could with the script they were given. And the cast, it is an amazing cast of characters. And the setting and the filming and everything does look absolutely gorgeous. The storyline isn't bad, it's just really safe. And the only other complaints I have about this movie, other than the first half of it just being really slow and the chemistry not working out between the characters, I really have a problem with some of the historical accuracies. Socially, the way that these people talk is not accurate to the time. I'm not going to get into it because I don't really want to, because it's a rabbit hole and I'm not going to get into it. But there's a lot of social a social happening in this movie that would probably not float in the 1930s. And that was kind of like a little bit off-putting, because I wish they would have depicted it more realistic, just because, why act like people back then were better than they actually were. I feel like they were kind of minimizing how bad people were back then, because there were a lot of judgmental people back then. There was a lot of just trying to control how other people are. So to me, I feel like they should have probably showed that more in this movie than what they did. That was kind of a loss. They really had an opportunity to do that, and they just didn't. It's like they kind of just kind of glossed over it, and I feel like that really is not appropriate for a movie that's kind of historical in a way. Like, yeah, it's a fiction movie, but it's set in the 1930s. This is something I always struggle with. I don't think fiction has to be accurate, historically accurate. I don't believe it has to be, but I do think whenever you are showing something in the real world and you're trying to get someone invested in it, you should try to be as historically accurate as possible, and it's very important to be historically accurate when it comes to the way people interact. But still, like I said, it's not a huge deal. It's just something that bothers me personally, because I just know historically this is not how people interacted back then. I also got annoyed because there's a .22 pistol that is used a lot in this movie, and there's some things that happen with it that are just very unlikely. One thing that happens, and this can happen, but it's just, the likelihood of it isn't that high. Basically, someone's bones, their leg bone, gets shattered by a .22 round. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? And then later on, 2 people get killed with 1 shot from a .22, and then that was just like, okay, yeah, you're stretching it a bit far. My suspension of disbelief is now gone. So there is a lot of issues with just realism in general. Do I think that that's something to knock the movie down and call it a bad movie just for historical inaccuracies and just for, I guess, weapon inaccuracies? No, I don't think you should beat it down over the head and say, oh, it's a bad movie just because it's historically inaccurate. Because at the end of the day, it's a fictional movie. I'm just talking about my personal preference when it comes to a movie like this. I do prefer things to be a little bit historically accurate, unless you're just going for a completely different, timeline. You know what I mean? If you're doing, an alternate universe, like Fallout, where, it creates its own history or something like that, then I get it. But when it comes to something that's set in our world and supposed to be in our universe, I kind of want it to try to stay as historically accurate as possible. I'm not going to knock it big for that. This movie has other problems that I have to knock it over for, such as the slow pacing for the first hour of the movie, characters not being able to interact very well, and playing it just very, very safe. Those 3 things combined are enough for me to go ahead and lower this movie to a 6 out of 10. It's not a bad movie, but it isn't a great movie. It's above average. It could have been great, but it just doesn't quite reach it. I think that there was a lot of potential here, but there's also just a lot of missed opportunities that they should have taken. But I do really still enjoy the majority of this cast. Like I said, the only person I did not enjoy was Armie Hammer, but I enjoyed seeing Gal Gadot. I enjoyed seeing Kenneth Branagh. I enjoyed seeing Letitia Wright. I enjoyed seeing Russell Brand. I enjoyed seeing Ali Fazal. I enjoyed seeing Tom Bateman. I enjoyed seeing all of these different actors and actresses. I think they did a fantastic job. And it's unfortunate that they weren't given a better script. But thank you guys for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed. I did agree with the critics on this one, which it pains me to say. I don't like agreeing with the critics, to be honest with you. I give it a 6 out of 10. They give it around a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is about a 6 out of 10 movie to me. The audience score is an 80%, and I don't get that one bit. I guess if you just completely turn off your brain and just like, enjoy a fun popcorn movie, yeah, I could see it, I guess. But I just couldn't do that. So maybe that's on me. But yeah, 6 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you in the next video. You have a fantastic day. Bye bye.